Hey guys, this is Tilwin, and today we are finally going to talk about the new feature that has recently arrived in Era of Chaos, namely Rarity Rosters. And you probably already know that this is one of my favorite topics, and I can't wait to actually present this to you. I've already adjusted my roster optimization tool, so feel free to check the timestamps on the video below, and if you want to skip how these actually work and just want to go to how I have optimized the tool, feel free to do so. I will also leave a link down below in regards to how to access the tool. So let's get started. Um, the new rosters are found together with the old ones, of course. So we go to the museum, into the roster, and then if we look into the left side, you will see this special. I'm not sure why they really call it special, or how they like to call it aptitude. But yeah, I'm still gonna refer to this as unit rarity roster, since this is how the community is accustomed to referring to, yeah, a unit's rarity. So if you go into this new special tab, you should now see that we have 4 new rosters. They are of course visible also in the old, but I'm just gonna use the quick menu. And what's really exciting about this feature is that these new rosters actually behave a bit differently from the old ones. So let's start with this. Um, the common parts of these new rosters, of course, when compared with the old ones, is that it kind of makes sense that if I have an SR roster and I add units to this roster, I'm going to boost my SR units. And if we look here, already my SR roster, it's only green. It's gonna take a while to upgrade, of course, but I can already put SR units here, and this will benefit all my SR units. So from this point of view, absolutely nothing changes. What is the big game changer is actually the second line we are seeing here on a rarity roster, like all units get la 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 attack and la 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 health, compared to if I were to go to any, I don't know, faction roster and you would not see this extra line. So this extra line is actually what makes the difference, let's say, between these rarity rosters and the regular rosters. Of course, in my opinion, even without it, they would have been a great addition because you guys probably already noticed we have a lot of units. They keep adding units into the game. We are focusing more and more on factions, and then yeah, of course, we end up with a lot of excess units that actually do not help us or did not use to help us previously that much with improving our score. So, the idea of the rarity rosters is that aside from, of course, being able to improve units of a specific rarity, and of course, this is very good, especially if you have an SSR heavy formation or SR and SSR heavy formation. But we will see that even an R roster can be extremely, extremely valuable. And the reason for this is that they've introduced what I like to call a global buff. So, what we currently had, like I put castle units into the castle roster and it benefits my castle units. I put offense units into the offense roster and I, of course, boost my offense units. This is what now I'm referring to as a local buff. Okay, so this buff is a buff that works only on the units of that specific roster. The difference is that this global buff that they've now introduced exclusively to rarity rosters will actually boost all your units. And what I mean by all your units, I mean precisely that. So it's gonna give, in this case, we see that my R roster is already giving a 75.8% to my R units in terms of health and attack, but it's also boosting all my units, including R units themselves, an additional 7.6%. And of course, when you compare the two values, you would say, well, okay, Tailwind, but what's 7.6% compared to 75.8? Again, I'm not gonna go very in depth on strategy. That's up to you guys if you want to experiment with things. But what this is saying, and this is huge, is that these rosters are gonna benefit your entire teams. So I can see this as being firsthand, without even looking at numbers or doing experiments, as something extremely, extremely valuable for Clash of Gods teams. And why is that? Because in Clash of Gods, we have 24 units. And you're gonna build units with multiple heroes, so probably you're gonna have very many factions, or of course many unit classes, and this complicates things because we already spoke in the previous optimization videos that we want our rosters to be as focused as possible on as few factions and or unit classes as possible. And this is of course very very difficult to do when you have to deal with multiple teams. So the advantage with these global buffs is that you don't need to worry about that when it comes to this component. And even though it's small, in COG this this is equivalent to uh, boosting 24 units. In BOG this would be 18 units, and of course in your main formation it would be your 8 primary units plus your backup formation units. Okay, so this is what actually makes Rarity Rosters so valuable, so important in my opinion, aside the fact of course that we are getting extra slots to further boost our power. So how does this global buff work? So if you look at the local buff, you will see that the local buff behaves very, very similarly. Actually, it behaves the same with all the other rosters. So Rarity rosters still have a bonus that's based on some sort of tier associated with that roster. And by upgrading this tier, of course, you're improving the local bonus as well. And of course, the higher the unit scores, the bigger the local bonus. So absolutely nothing changes from this point of view. The one thing that changes indeed in this direction is how we are upgrading the rosters. So Rarity rosters have their own special roster runes, which currently you can farm into the guild store. So if you go into the guild store, then you have this new slot and you can grab these new roster runes from here to upgrade your SSR rosters. As you can see, I've already refreshed a couple of times today as I'm trying to get them up and running as soon as possible, but without doing too much investment, of course. What's special here is that we have also these special roster runes, and to obtain these are actually very easy to obtain. You just go here into the exchange, and then you can select some of your, I don't know, roster runes that maybe you're not really using. Like in my case, let's say maybe I would pick Conflux, and I would just say, okay, I want to exchange a couple of these for special roster runes. So I've selected 24 Conflux runes. I'm just gonna click exchange, and when I do this, boom, I've gained 24 special roster runes. So honestly, these are not an issue. These are super free-to-play friendly, or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I don't think they are going to be an issue to upgrading our rosters. But of course, we have to see, depending on how these are going to scale into higher tiers here. So I'm not sure what the cost is going to be for orange, for red, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so this is the only difference when we look at the local bonus, right? The way we actually have to upgrade this tier. What's interesting about the global bonus, and if we look now at exclusively at the global bonus, is that these percentages, and this is not very evident at first, but they are actually strongly related to the local bonus. So I've done some experiments. You guys can also play with it. But the idea here is that the global bonus is actually an exact fraction of the local. So in the case of our units, and if you look here, you will see it's kind of accurate. It's approximately 10% of what I have here in the local. So if I look at my local bonus here of 75.8, we see that the global gets a 7.6. So this is approximately 10%. I'm not sure if they're rounding up on the user interface or they're actually rounding up behind the scenes as well when it comes to these values. But it's considering it 10% is a very good approximation. And this is something that you cannot control, right? So this is something that the game does. So the more power we put into the local, we get that much power by divided by 10 for our rosters into the global bonus. Okay, and this is how the global bonus basically is calculated. So just by upgrading your Rarity rosters, you're of course upgrading indirectly this global bonus. And then for SR units, I've done some math. Again, this is still under testing. I'm still trying to collect information from the community. If you guys want to contribute, please feel free to contact me on Discord, and I'll be happy to give you a link where you can input some of your data. Um, but for SR roster, basically it's something like 16%. Then for SSR, it's 20%. So here it's actually very, very clean because I take 10.6, multiply by 2, and I get 21.2. So this is exactly 20% in this case. But again, you will see deviations, small deviations, depending on the values of the local bonus. And then for the commander, I think it's 27%. So far, this is what I could figure out. So this is also very interesting, okay? Because if we look at these rarity rosters, we already get that this global bonus is gonna benefit our whole team, so they are I wouldn't necessarily call it a game changer, but it does make optimizing these rosters a bit more difficult for your teams. But the cool thing here is that the bigger the rarity, the bigger the global bonus. So the bigger the incentive to actually fill in these rosters to the brim, so your team can benefit from them the most. Yeah, don't worry about the calculation. I will get back to this. My tool already handles it for you, but I just want to give you an overview of how the system works. And if I were to have an opinion on this edition, I think it's a very nice addition to Era of Chaos. I think it's definitely useful, especially for something like R units, because right now our formations don't really use R units that much anymore. So in a way, they can still benefit our teams. They can still find a very strong purpose, yeah, into improving our power. And I personally think that this is a very good incentive, right, to still invest in your R units. So, for example, we recently got Null Awakening, and you might wonder, okay, why should I bother with the Null Awakening at all? Well, this is a very good incentive, right? Even if you're not playing Fortress, you can place this null into the R roster, you can awaken it, you can upgrade it, you can make it powerful, well, give it a good score from a roster perspective, and yeah, it will definitely benefit your team, even though you're not playing any R units at all. Okay, so this is kind of the functionality. So to recap, we have 4 new rosters. They're related to rarity. They have the regular local bonus. They also have an additional global bonus that benefits all your units. And to upgrade them, you need specific runes, just like for the other rosters, and also some special runes that you can exchange into the store here under the roster system. Okay, so this is the functionality. Now, about the optimization itself, as I promised, I already set up the sheet. It's still under testing, and the reason why it is under testing is, as I mentioned, these percentages, I'm not exactly convinced that this fraction, that the global bonus is out of the local bonus is 100% accurate. So I'm still trying to grab some information. I still think it gives a very, very close and therefore a very good approximation for all intents and purposes. But yeah, because this is still in testing, we might expect changes specifically to these values. Also, I don't know, maybe some bugs or some issues appeared with all the additions that I've done. Okay, so what has changed into my tool? If you've previously used it, you can always, by the way, go into the versioning and read a bit about it. I'm also trying to include here tips like, okay, if you're making a copy, in this case, you need to go from scratch. Usually, if I don't mention this, you can contact me if you're not sure if you should get a new copy at all. Sometimes I'm just doing cosmetic changes or data changes, which you can also do yourself into your own copy. This is not the case. So I've upgraded the major version here because this is a very, very big change, right? With the Rarity Rosters, because we have the new roster types that look at the different unit property, which in our case would be the rarity. This was something that was simply not taken into consideration until now because it wasn't relevant for roster score. So yeah, if we look here at the unit list, and maybe some of you are already used the old order, I'm sorry, I had to change some things, adjust a bit some things, just because they kind of bug me all the time. And the biggest change I've done here is that I've changed the order between Conflux and Dungeon, because if you go into the actual roster system into the game, you will always see Conflux before dungeon. So I've done this adjustment here as well. I've also renamed UR to Commander, since I see this is the way the game refers to it in the roster system, so it made sense to keep it as close as possible to what's in game. So I don't know, maybe somebody who's using this tool and isn't aware of what an UR is, since we are not releasing this into the interface anywhere, now it's clearer for them. And then I've also renamed the old attack roster into offense, since this is closer to what we see into the game. So if you're getting a new copy now and you still haven't gotten this new 3.0.0 version, just a heads up, you cannot just select the scores, copy from your old, paste into the new. You will have to take a bit of care here, since maybe I have changed some additional order of things. I've also renamed Archmage to Mage, since I'm not using awakening names here. If you're gonna awaken your unit, yeah, you will have to keep track of it, or you can come manually if you really want and change the name here. So if I have a halberdier instead of Bob Pikeman, for instance, I can just come here and type halberdier, and then whenever you're using it into your team, you can find it as a halberdier. But this is up to you. Personally, I'm okay with the non-awaken names, and yeah, this is how I'm gonna leave it here. Next, what comes as a change here, of course, is into my rosters tab. I've added 4 new rosters, and I've also added this global column. And yeah, I know this has caused a few confusions into the community already. Honestly, it was much easier to edit here than to just put it here into the dictionaries. Because of the way I'm grabbing the information into the script behind the scenes, I just added the new columns and I'm pulling this information as well. My advice is do not touch these percentages, as they are decided by the game, and therefore they are not something that's, yeah, depending from account to account. As I said, they are still a bit experimental, but I'm pretty confident that the values I put here are very, very, very close to reality, if not precisely what's happening behind into the game's code, which I do not know. But yeah, so we have 10%, as I said, for R, 16% for SR, 20% for SSR, and 27% for the commander. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Other than that, you just go back into your team, you copy this team tab, and you introduce your team, and you should see the results. Something interesting here is what may confuse some at first is because yeah, this global thing is not very obvious into the game. So for example, you might add here just the default number of slots, and then you're building your team, and you have only SR units, and you're doing the optimization, and you will see the optimizer will most likely always recommend some units also into your R roster. And then you might wonder, okay, why are they here? Well, they are here because the script now also takes into account the global buff. So yeah, this is the big major change that I actually had to do behind the scenes. So right now, if you're adding your units, this global buff is also taken into account to optimize your formation and give the best possible score. Everything else stays the same. To give a bit more input about this global buff, maybe basically what I'm doing is that if I have R units, of course, it takes into consideration those R units for the roster itself. But it also takes into consideration every other unit that you have into the formation for this global buff. So this global buff applies to all your units. And it basically calculates the 10% gain that your units would get out of the total score out of the roster. Okay, so you don't need to worry, this global buff is taken into account, and yeah, if you don't want to do this optimization manually, my tool already offers support in this direction as well. As I said, it's still experimental to a certain degree, so if you do find, I don't know, that you feel it's not optimizing properly, meaning you tried a different configuration for the same team manually and you got better score results, as in pure power results, just let me know, and yeah, we can take a look and compare the two and see what's going on there. Another thing I want to mention, and this was something that some people were very confused, was about this total score here. So this total score here might seem very confusing for some of you. Um, so here normally you would have the actual rosters, right? So Castle, Inferno, Dungeon, Offense, wherever. Then you would have the units that are recommended for that roster, and then you would have a score. And yeah, the score that you're seeing here is not the score that you also see in the game. And I'm going to explain why. This tool basically does calculations based on a formation. This is something that in-game doesn't really do. In game, you will get your scores in vacuum. The roster is considered a global feature somewhere. But if you are into the roster system itself in game, you don't actually see the context of a formation, right? So you're not optimizing, the game doesn't know you're optimizing it for your Astral team or your Bog team or your Cog team, and it doesn't really care. This is why we have this tool, right? So in this tool, you specify very explicitly what you want to optimize for, and then the tool applies the optimizations and spits out this score. So this score actually takes into account your formation. So you will notice things like, for example, if you have, let's say, 4 tower units, you might notice that your score associated with the tower roster is inflated by 4 when compared to the game score. So maybe game gives you something like 25,000, and then this total score inside this sheet would say 100,000. Okay, so 4 times more. Again, this is completely irrelevant. Honestly, I could also drop this column if this is confusing to many people. The only reason I'm leaving it in is because it's extremely valuable for me for debugging purposes. Because it kind of gives you an idea of how much each roster values in the context of your team. And especially now with global bonuses being added, you can kind of take a look at it, compare it with the in-game, and see the actual impact that your team is having onto that roster. But again, if I keep hearing that this is going to be confusing for many people are worried that this is not optimizing properly because of the scores they're seeing here, then I can just remove this column basically. Yeah, so that's the purpose of it. And of course, the weights. This is something I should also mention. Now, are also taken into consideration for the global bonus. Okay, so if you're gonna say that certain units have a 50%, let's say, importance into your team, for example, or maybe double to 100%, this is reflected also into the global bonus, right? So, and this is important because basically the global bonus applies to all units, right? So if I want to optimize 8 units equally, it will say, okay, so 8 units are gonna benefit from this global bonus. But if I'm giving some units very little importance, then obviously you don't really want those units to also cut into your global bonus. So yeah, to give global bonus such an importance because those units are not relevant. Okay, so yes, feel free to play with weights if you feel like you're more advanced into this optimization thing, a number game, and you enjoy doing this. And yeah, I think this will definitely be valuable for some of you. If not, please just use the default. Don't even bother with the weight. It should give you a good enough optimization, and everything should work just fine. Yep, so I think this is pretty much it. Of course, I'm available on Discord. You can contact me anytime. Please feel free to read the instructions here. And if you have any questions or any problems with the sheet, please feel free to reach me on Discord, write a comment on YouTube. Let's figure it out. And I hope to be able to help you to, yeah, get the best out of your teams and out of your rosters. So I think this is about it for today. Thank you very much for listening to my blabber as always, and see you into the next video. Okay, bye.